Yo, what's going on everyone? It's Brian here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today I am proud to bring you a review of Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. Now I want to give a quick shout out to Yacht Club Games and Celia Schilling specifically, as she released a special code for Jim and I to play and enjoy. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out our episode with her on the Power Hour podcast, link below. So let's get into this review. Fresh off the presses and released on December 13th, Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon is the 6th game in the Shovel Knight series. This also marks the first departure from the typical 2D platforming that we are so accustomed to since that classic from 2014. Released for the Switch, PS4, Xbox One, Steam, this game is available pretty much everywhere, and it's available for $20, which is a steal, but I don't want to give too much of a spoiler already. If you ask me how to describe this game genre, I would say it's almost part Bejeweled meets a roguelike meets a dungeon crawler meets Shovel Knight. I don't know how else to describe it. There is a lot going on in this, so there is no one simple explanation. But first, let's take a look at this presentation and start with the graphics. Now, Shovel Knight is known for recreating that 8-bit nostalgia that we all love, but this game actually takes it up a notch, and it kind of feels like their first entry into the 16-bit era. All the sprites are a lot bigger, a lot more colorful, and depending on which board you're on, you might not notice the background, but there's a lot going on here. You have a whole bunch of different enemies that you're going to see over and over again, and there's a lot of animation and just moving parts on these boards. It looks beautiful, and honestly, it really shows an evolution in the Shovel Knight series. I wouldn't be shocked if you don't see a new Shovel Knight 2D game that's in 16-bit, because these sprites just look amazing. But for me, the real star of the Shovel Knight series has always been that soundtrack. I can always truly appreciate a company that knocks it out of the park when it comes to hitting that retro feel with giving you new tunes that sound familiar but are definitely classic. It's been a really long time since I've played a game and the soundtrack has stuck with me, but this game really has a lot of great tracks. I mean, just take a listen to this. That is just a classic, and all the sound effects are just so appropriate. So just from a presentation standpoint, I loved what I got here. Now let's move on to the control. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this game is available everywhere, but I was actually playing it on Steam and I used a PS4 controller. And it's a puzzle game, so really, you're only using your D-pad or analog stick to move your character around the board, and if they do have certain special abilities, you may have to use X, square. It really depends on which controller you're using. What I can tell you for sure is there is zero input lag with the control here. And this is one of those control schemes that does not try to overcomplicate things. Probably because they were really great at limiting how many inputs you actually have to deal with. Alright, let's jump into the meat of the game and talk about the actual gameplay. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this game is such a mishmash of different genres, it's tough to even know where to begin. So let's start with the fact that this, at its core, is a puzzle game. So it plays very similar to games like Bejeweled, where you're just trying to match up as many common enemies or items in order to unlock larger combos to get more points. But how you get rid of these enemies is where the game takes an immediate interesting turn in a unique little combat where every time you go against an enemy, you take some damage. Now, certain enemies give you more damage, other ones have special powers that you have to avoid at certain times, and depending on certain power-ups you find, you may be able to avoid the damage altogether. But either way, your goal is to link as many of these enemies together as possible without filling up the board or dying. Aside from enemies, you will also have blocks, bombs, and of course these lovely potions which give you some of that much needed life back. So it's a real struggle to decide, are you going to engage certain standalone enemies in order to give yourself a larger combo, or do you not have enough life and maybe you need to avoid them so you don't get trapped? There's so much strategy in just that element, but then you add in the roguelike element, and where this really comes in is that with all the money and points you earn, you can unlock these relics and items that will randomly spawn in each level. And for those of you who are familiar with this genre, then you know every playthrough is going to be a little different because you cannot control which weapons you find, which relics you find. So it's really going to be a gamble. Sometimes you're going to feel completely lucky and almost overpowered. Other times you may die really fast because you don't have any items. It's all part of the fun. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the fact that it is a dungeon crawler, each level may contain a boss. So as you find more and more keys, you will not only be able to find the exit, but these boss gates, and even some secret rooms. But the fun part is, once you fight these bosses, you can actually unlock these characters for playthroughs. And let me tell you, each one feels completely different. The first time I unlocked the Plague Knight, it felt like I needed to take a completely different strategy because he was so different from the Shovel Knight. And these differences just get more and more out there depending on some of the characters you find. Now, if all this wasn't enough to tell you how randomized the game is, you also have a ton of options available. So every time you die in this game, you usually would go back to camp. But you can change the option to be infinite lives, so you just keep replaying levels. But if you do go back to camp, that is where you can go to the shop and unlock some of those relics and items I was mentioning, so it may be worth your time. And then speaking of returning to camp, you can actually decide if you want to play the levels in a linear fashion or just in random order. Very quickly, because at first I sucked at this game, I decided to stop doing linear because I was just tired of seeing the same 4 opening levels over and over. And once I got to random, I got to see a lot more of the game. And that was just a little bit more of a fun way for me to play, but I love that they give you that option in this game. The one thing I will say is that you really cannot take anything for granted from playthrough to playthrough, because making the smallest mistake will take away all those power-ups and all those relics that you found, and it will start you back at zero. And that can be so heartbreaking, but sometimes it's a nice refresh. And as I said, if you've unlocked some bosses, I would really suggest giving each one a try because they do play so differently. From an originality standpoint, no individual aspect of this game feels truly unique, but very similar to Star Wars, which took a whole bunch of different genres and put them together and gave you something new, this game achieves that. It's no secret on this channel, I do not like puzzle games. I kept finding myself drawn back to want to play this game over and over because I wanted to unlock more and more characters and see if I could get just a little bit further. So it feels like an original idea for me, even if it's not truly unique. And of course, when we talk replayability, this game has it out the ass. I mean, I haven't beat the game, and maybe there's only one ending, but even if there is, as I said, no one playthrough will ever feel exactly the same, and the different combos of weapons makes this game already infinitely replayable, but add in the fact that you can play against some friends, you could really just play this game over and over and really never get bored with it. So overall, I would truly recommend this game. Whether you're a fan of the Shovel Knight series, whether you're a fan of retro games, puzzles, roguelikes, I don't know what to tell you. If you like anything even a little bit retro inspired, just the graphics and sound alone may be enough to pull you in. If you're someone that can't keep up with a fast, frenetic pace, this may not be the game for you because sometimes it can get really crazy, but I thrive in games like this, and I would highly recommend it any day of the week. And I once again really want to say thank you so much to Yacht Club Games and Celia for sending me this copy. I am truly enjoying my time with it. And when it comes to beer pairing, I'm going to go with the Oscar Blues Grow and Brew Good Night. This is an Imperial Red Ale that comes in at a whopping 8.7%, but somehow still manages to be very easy to drink. It's a very delicious beer. If you're lucky enough to find a distributor that carries these guys, I would highly recommend it because this is just the right amount of alcohol, flavor, and lightness in a beer to pair very well with such a fun, crazy-ass puzzle game. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. Cheers, guys.